Welcome everyone. My name is Lynn Johnston. I blog at writesmarternotharder.com, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. For the next 30 days, I'm going to be doing a series of video blogs about story structure for NaNoWriMo. Today is day one. Hooray! Today you're going to be writing your story's opening, and there's 4 things that you need to be sure you introduce in the opening of your story. First, your protagonist or main character, and this actually could be multiple characters if you're writing an ensemble cast or you have a pair of heroes in your story. That's fine. Everything I say about the protagonist will apply to those main characters. And different parts of the story might be carried by different characters if you have a multiple protagonist story like that. But basically, you're going to be introducing to the reader the setting also. You're going to be saying to the reader, this is the world where my characters live, and giving them just enough of the world for the reader to get intrigued and to really kind of enter it. So you're basically letting them know this is what the world is like that you're going to be spending your time in while you're reading the story. You're going to be introducing conflict. It might be the main conflict of your story, and ideally, you want to get that main conflict in there as soon as possible. But practically speaking, sometimes we have what's called a bridging conflict, where you have a smaller conflict that's part of the character's ordinary life that leads them into the main conflict. And finally, story promise. This is basically what you are promising your reader. You're telling the reader, this is the kind of story you're going to get. And it's very important that you make that promise really clear so that the reader doesn't feel cheated as they're reading the story. If you start with a scene that makes your story look like a romance and then the romance disappears and the rest of the story is horror, your reader is going to be very upset after they make it past the first couple chapters and the story becomes something completely different than they were led to believe by the opening. So, protagonist. Here's what you're going to want to show the reader about your protagonist in this opening. You're going to want to give them just a taste of the everyday world. And a lot of times people ask me, doesn't that kind of conflict with the advice to start in the middle of things, an in medias res opening? And I'm going to say, no, it doesn't. I had actually a student once ask me, she said, well, my character is starting out on, my novel opens with my character about to go into this huge battle where his father dies. And this is like a big disruption in his life. There's no way I can show the character's everyday world. And what I told her is, actually, you will show the character's everyday world with the little things, because that character is in that battle because he's a warrior. As a warrior, he's trained with all the people he's fighting with. He's probably trained with his father. As he interacts with his men and his father, you're going to get all these little hints of what his everyday world is normally like through how he interacts with them. And also through how he seems to be prepared, his thoughts about the battle. Sometimes you show what the everyday world is through contrast. Your character might be engaged in this horrible problem that the story starts with and be thinking longingly of their warm bed and the bowl of gruel that they could have been having instead if they stayed home. That's a taste of the ordinary world. So there are lots of little sneaky ways that you can get that in there, even if you're starting in the middle of a big trauma for your character. Dominant impression. This is basically the impression that your protagonist gives when they walk into a room. It's the snap judgment that everybody is going to make about your character the first time they see them. It could be something like cynical cop. It could be something like super shy college student. It's not something that gives you a ton of depth in your character, but it's basically like the overall defining public appearance that people tend to immediately home in on within meeting the character in the first few seconds. And you're going to put more than that into it. That's not the only thing you show the reader in your opening, but you want to make sure that's in there and it's strong, because it's basically telling the reader, okay, this is the kind of person that I'm telling the story about. And you want to do it in such a way that they're like, but there's clearly stuff under the surface and we want to find out more about them. Ideally, if you can find a way to also kind of hint at the character's flaw, wound, or defining trauma, and we'll talk a little bit about those later. But basically, your character's not perfect, and it's really easy because we love our characters. We want to show their best side right up front, and you do want to show some of your character's best sides up front, their best traits, what's awesome about them. But also you want to give the reader just a little bit hint that this character under the surface is not perfect, that they've got something going on with them that they're struggling with or that they need to work at. And again, this isn't necessarily something you focus the whole scene on. This could be a single line of dialogue or interior monologue that just gives the reader a hint that maybe your cop has been divorced and he's still upset about it but doesn't want to talk about it. Or it could be a line of interior monologue where your character's like notices someone in the room and they're like, oh, he's just like that other person, so she kind of scoots away and tries not to be noticed by him. And you don't even know who that other person is, but you know that she was hurt by that other person, and that's why she's trying to avoid drawing a similar person's attention. So again, any way you can find to kind of just hint at it or sneak it in is good. And also hinting at it, not to say that you can't get into it in the story and do it in a way that creates sympathy or empathy for the character, but hinting at it is creating curiosity in the reader's mind. It raises the question of like, well, what happened to this person that they're afraid of cops, or they're afraid of doctors, or they get nervous every time they're in a party situation and someone asks them a particular kind of question. It basically hints at backstory and what the character has been through. And getting your readers curious about your characters is a great idea because that's one of the reasons that readers keep reading. Creating sympathy and empathy. You can get away with doing one. If you can manage to create both, that's even better. And let's talk a little bit about the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is basically rooting interest. It's something that makes the reader want your characters to succeed. So showing the character in a difficult situation that they didn't deserve is the primary way that you create sympathy. And it can be small. It could just be like someone who's trying really hard and they miss the bus anyway because someone else trips them as they're running after it. Or somebody who's having a really difficult time on the job and they're really exhausted because their baby kept them up all night and they're trying really hard and they're still not quite getting it right, and their boss is disappointed. Just any kind of little situation that shows you, hey, this person is trying their best, they're a good person, they're trying to accomplish something worthy, and they're putting a lot of effort into it. We love rooting for underdogs, and we love rooting for people who are trying their best. Empathy, on the other hand, is about reader identification. Empathy is like, oh, I've been in that situation too, and I know how it feels, so I'm feeling it with you. And you can create empathy, again, in very simple ways. Give the character a familiar problem. We've all had a fight with our boyfriend. We've all been unfairly accused of something at some point in our lives. We've all been in the situation of failing at things. We've all been in the situation of being at the mercy of someone who's a little bit mean-spirited and not having a good reply for the snotty remark that they made. It can be something very small that creates empathy, but basically putting your character, no matter how strange and weird they are, if that character is a superhero and they have a totally unidentifiable problem that they're trying to solve, give them something small, like worrying about someone that they are worrying about someone who's not present, right? It's like we've all worried about someone that we're not here and able to take care of, but who we care about. So again, looking for ways to create sympathy, looking for ways to create empathy. They can be very small, but if you can put both into your opening, you're going to be well on your way to getting the reader to bond with your character. And finally, this is a little bit harder, goal and motivation. Your character should be trying to do something in your opening, and we should understand why they want to do it. We don't necessarily have to understand the entire backstory, but it needs to seem reasonable. If your character's goal is to like shoot everybody that's carrying a bottle of water with them, we better find out that there's a good reason that that character is shooting those people with bottles of water. Making the motivation too mysterious is one of the mistakes that new writers often do. And again, you don't have to explain the whole thing. You can just hint at it. You can basically hint that, oh my gosh, only the aliens are carrying bottles of water today, or you think that like there's a plot, the character thinks that there's a plot to poison people with bottles of water, and he's specifically tracking the people who are doing the poisoning. No matter how crazy your character's goal is, we'll kind of go along with it as a reader if we have at least a hint that the character has a reasonable reason for doing it. And we don't, again, have to have the whole explanation, but we have to believe that your character is not totally crazy. And sometimes it can be hard because if you've got a character who isn't quite engaged in the main adventure yet, he's still in his everyday life and you're still in the process of bringing him into that adventure, you might have to give him, in the same way that we talked about bridging goals, or bridging conflicts, you might have to give him a bridging goal. Maybe in this first scene, his only goal is to get through the day at school without being tardy because he's had so many tardies that he's in danger of getting suspended. And maybe it isn't until chapter 3 that the alien shows up in his bedroom at night and said, guess what? You're the hero we've all been looking for. And in the meantime, in chapters 1 and 2, he's got to deal with conflicts in his ordinary life, and he should be pursuing goals in his ordinary life. And that's one of the ways you make your character more realistic, because on any given day, at any point in time, there's always something we want, whether it's just for class to be over, or for it to be 5 o'clock, or to not run into that annoying coworker, whatever it is, there's always something that we want. And giving your character something that he wants right off the bat, even if it's small, gives your story a sense of purpose. And it also makes the character more relatable. Setting. One of the things you should think about, especially on your opening when you're introducing your setting to the reader, is what the impact of the setting is going to be on characters, what the meaning of the setting is going to be for characters, and if there's an extraordinary element that you can showcase without being contrived or pulling the story in a way that the story, doesn't need to go right now. In terms of impact on characters, you want to have your characters interacting with your setting. The setting should not just be this big set that they pass through while they're having a conversation. Even if they're doing it in small ways, like scuffing feet on the pavement, or taking a deep breath and noticing there's a little more pollution in the air today, and coughing maybe a little bit, or picking up an object and playing with it, or handing things to other characters, fussing with their own possessions. The setting needs to be something that's part of the action for it to be interesting to the reader. And also think about in terms of meaning for characters. If you are a person who hates your job, when you're at your desk, that cubicle you're sitting in has a negative meaning for you. It probably represents oppression, or your feeling of being trapped in a place, or it represents the past you're trying to escape by going to night school and getting a degree so you can get a different job. All the everyday places that your character hangs out in are going to have meaning for them. And then, of course, if they're going to some place that's unusual, that's also going to have meaning for them. If your character is on a cruise to the Bahamas is probably a vacation that they've been planning for a long time, and it probably represents something to them: freedom, or total relaxation, relief from responsibilities, whatever it is that your character is doing in that setting suggests the meaning that setting will have for the character. And if if we're seeing the setting through the character's eyes, that meaning is going to filter it and make that setting special. It's going to be much more interesting seeing it through the character's meaning and the meaning that the character's imposing than it would be if you were just reading a travel book about that location. And then in terms of extraordinary element, if there's anything about your setting, especially if you're writing fantasy or science fiction, or if you're taking the reader to some exotic place, like you have a mystery set in Indonesia, look for little ways that you can show what's different about that setting from what your reader is used to. Maybe the character could be buying an exotic dish there, or having a fight about his hotel room with the clerk. If your character is getting on a spaceship, maybe there's some way that you can have your character interacting with that setting, like interacting with the totally automated passenger boarding system. Whatever it is that your character is doing, look for a way that you can have them interact with what's extraordinary or interesting, and show the readers how that setting element works instead of explaining it to them. That's going to really enrich your setting. Conflict. Ideally, you want to start with your main conflict as soon as possible in the story. And again, sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes we have a bridging conflict that kind of moves us into the main conflict because it's not. So sometimes you have to see what the character's normal life is like before they get abducted by fairies or charged with saving the world or whatever. But the most important thing is that conflict gives your story, especially your opening, a sense of movement and direction. If the character has a goal, that means they're heading towards something. If the character is engaged in conflict, something is happening. So it doesn't always have to be a big conflict. Sometimes the conflicts can be very subtle. It could be somebody having a very strained conversation with their spouse. But some sort of conflict needs to be in your opening. And ideally, you want your conflict to reveal character. So whatever the conflict is, it's something that shows you how this person, what this person is like by how they deal with conflict. And so finally, story promise. You're going to be writing in a specific genre and possibly a subgenre, and readers are going to have expectations of that. People expect to be scared when they're reading horror. They expect to be delighted with some sort of like supernatural or scientific setting when they're reading fantasy and sci-fi. They expect justice to be done when they're reading a mystery. So you want to think about what you're going to promise to your reader. Are we going to see a killer get caught? Are we going to see a kingdom being toppled and an evil wizard being removed from power? Are we going to see two people falling hopelessly in love and spending the rest of their lives together? You want to think about that. And also, on top of that, once you've figured out what your genre and your subgenre promise is, you want to think about the primary emotion of your story. And primary doesn't mean every scene's going to have it, but it means the majority of scenes are going to have it. So if you're writing a comedy, the primary emotion is probably going to be humor. If you're writing a romance, the primary emotion is probably going to be longing. If you're writing a funny romance, you're going to have to keep that balance. You're going to have to make sure there's lots of funny, but there's also lots of longing at the same time. So think about your story and think about the emotions you want your reader to have as they're reading it. And why this is important is not only does it help you set the right tone in your opening, as you're going through and you're writing your entire story, you're going to be making choices, and you will have choices that look good to you, but that take you away from the tone that you started with in your novel. And when you ever have a choice between a scene that gives your reader the primary emotion and a scene that gives the reader something else, you better make sure that there's an extremely good reason for not giving the reader the primary emotion they're expecting to experience while they're reading your novel. So it can be a guide for plotting as well as a guide for how you maintain tone throughout the story. So getting started. If you've never done NaNoWriMo before, and if you don't already have a writing habit, I'm going to make a few suggestions. A lot of writers find it very helpful to have a pre-writing ritual, something that gets you in the mood. And it doesn't have to be something that's specifically writing oriented, but it's something that if you do it every day before you write, every time you do it, it will get you into the habit of writing, because you're going to start associating writing and making progress on your story with that ritual. So it could be something that's focused on helping you write. Maybe you do a little meditation, or maybe you take a walk and think about your story question. And that's a great way to squeeze in a little extra productivity too, taking a walk and thinking about your your story, or meditating on your characters, or doing a little yoga just to relax and really get you in a good state of mind. But it doesn't have to be. You could literally do the Pavlovian thing and say, every time I start writing right before, I'm going to ring a bell, so that eventually you associate that bell ringing with writing and being productive. I'm also going to suggest that if you are not in the habit of writing every day, that you start out your sessions with a very short pre-writing exercise just to warm up. And this could be anything. This could just be writing a page in your journal about what happened yesterday, just to kind of clear your mind and get your pen moving, basically, or your fingers typing. It could be something related to your story. Holly Lyle gives this fantastic exercise that is great to do as a warm-up, and it's also really fantastic when you're stuck. You basically look at the scene, think about the scene that you're planning to write next, and you start writing the sentence, "This is the scene where," and then you start writing about what happens in your scene. And you don't worry about making it coherent or chronological. You just start writing everything that comes to mind when you think about that scene. This is a scene where my character jumps off a cliff, but it turns out that the cliff is not as high as she thought, and so she only breaks her ankle, and then it turns out that there's dolphins in this area, and the dolphins show up, and I really wish I could find a way to get the hero in here, but for some reason he's off like working a bank heist in Hawaii, and I don't know how to get her out of here. Whatever it is, just go ahead and free associate, free write. Just kind of think about your scene and keep your fingers moving for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, just to get you in that mood of putting words on paper that are somewhat related to your story. A lot of times for me, when I do this exercise, it turns into a problem-solving thing where I realize, oh, this scene is not working yet, or I'm not ready to write this scene because I don't know how my hero is going to get out of this, or I just realized I have a plot hole in this scene that I didn't notice when I was planning it. I also recommend that for NaNoWriMo, and for any time you're trying to have a writing habit, schedule a dedicated writing time. A lot of people recommend that it be the same time every day, and that's helpful in the sense that it gets you into that habit and makes it easier for you to associate writing with your particular time of the day. But realistically, not everybody's schedule is exactly the same every day. So if you can't write every day at the same time, that's okay. Pick a time, sometime to write, put it on your schedule, and commit to doing it. I recommend minimizing interruptions as much as possible. If you are somebody who has to check Facebook every 3 minutes, turn off your internet or use one of those blocking programs like Rescue Time. Don't take your phone into your writing space with you, or put it on silent. Anything you can do to give yourself a greater chance of maintaining focus long enough to write is good. So whatever it takes, if you can go into your office today, or your writing space, or the cafe where you're going to hang out and do NaNoWriMo, and just sit for maybe like 3 minutes and just pay attention to all the things that are calling for your attention, whether it's a messy desk or noises outside that maybe you're going to need to wear earplugs to block out, or whatever you notice that's distracting you. Pay attention to it and figure out how you are going to minimize those distractions. And finally, I recommend writing in short, timed periods with many breaks in between. And here's why. You might feel like being on a roll, you just want to write for 3 hours until you write yourself out. And you can do that, but that's exhausting. Your brain is constantly working. It's using up fuel from using up glucose from your blood sugar. It's creating cellular waste that have to be removed. And if they don't get removed faster than they're being produced, then you start to have a problem in terms of functionality. It reduces your ability to think and to write. And writing involves a lot of thinking. So I recommend setting a timer for a period that works for you. It could be as small as 15 minutes, especially if you're new to this and having trouble getting started. It could be as long as an hour and a half. And you will fall into a rhythm. You'll start to see at what point you start getting naturally distracted from writing. Set the timer for that long. I like 45, 50 minutes. That's about how long it takes for me to need a break. Get up and move around. Moving around increases oxygen to your brain. It's just good for you health-wise. You can think about your story while you're moving around, but it gets the blood flowing, gets more blood flowing to your brain, so more of those cellular wastes can be removed from your brain and get your brain working better again. And I find that 3 hours where I take a mini break every 45 minutes, I produce at least 1,000 more words during those 3 hours than I would if I just wrote straight through. And it's often more than 1,000 words, but 1,000 words is the minimum gain that I get from just taking like a 3-minute break every 45 minutes where I walk around or stretch or do jumping jacks or something. And finally, I want to suggest that you, well, maybe not finally, I think we might have a couple more slides here, but I want to suggest very strongly that every day when you finish writing, you celebrate your progress. One thing that is really mentally grueling about a writing marathon is that, especially in the early parts of it, you're like, holy crap, I have so much more to do. In the middle of it, you're like, oh my God, I've been doing this for so long. I'm so tired and I don't know if my ideas are any good. And at the end, you're like, holy cow, I just want to finish. I'm so tired. I want to get through this. And part of the reason that we feel this way is that we don't allow ourselves to celebrate until we get to the end. And psychologically, it is very hard for us to focus on long-term gratification. We need some short-term gratification, and we need to feel like we are making progress and that progress means something. And if you keep your eye just focused solely on that final word count of 50,000 words, it's easier to get discouraged and listen to the doubts that start creeping in as you write. So I strongly encourage you to record your word count, acknowledge the achievement, take a moment to just savor the fact that you wrote at least 1,600 words today and you're doing something that you've been wanting to do for a while, something that maybe you're taking some time to get back into, maybe you've been away from it, something that a lot of people in the world say over and over again that they want to do, but they never get around to. You're doing it. You deserve credit for that. Kudos to you for taking the time and being disciplined enough to sit down and meet your word count today. I encourage you to tell someone else, preferably someone else who's going to be happy for you. So you might want to stick to the Nano forums or other friends who are writing, or basically people who are very supportive. Don't tell it to someone who's like, yeah, but you got 48,000 more words to go. Tell it to someone who's going to be like, that's awesome. I'm so proud of you for making progress today. And, you know, sometimes a little physical reward psychologically will give you a boost. Put on your favorite song and dance. Do a happy dance to celebrate the fact that you actually made progress and you stuck to it and you did something that it takes actually a lot of willpower to do and a lot of concentration. I also recommend mini rewards. For example, you're giving up a lot in order to do NaNoWriMo. You probably are watching less TV. You're probably playing fewer video games, reading less for fun, maybe giving up socializing. If you hit your word count, let yourself play a round of your favorite video game. Let yourself have a 15-minute phone call with a friend so that you're getting that social connection that you've had to cut back on. You know, let yourself go do something fun. If you like walking, go take a little celebration walk. Do something to basically reward yourself now and give yourself a little short-term gratification. That little burst of pleasure in the short term makes it easier to put your nose back on the grindstone tomorrow. And also keep up the good work. And by this, I don't just mean let's try harder and make sure we stick to it. I also mean set up your environment to help you be more successful. At the end of your writing session, maybe you want to clear your desk or get everything set up for tomorrow, make some notes for tomorrow's scene. Basically, have everything ready for tomorrow's writing so that tomorrow all you have to do is sit down and write. You don't have to do any chores to get your area ready to write. You're all prepped. I also recommend, if you're using the story blueprint in either of my workbooks or you're working with some other plotting system that involves brainstorming questions, I would answer tomorrow's questions today if you can, and then sleep on it. Ray Bradbury, famous science fiction writer, he has this dreamstorming technique where every night before he goes to bed, before he went to bed, he would formulate a question related to what he was writing. And it was usually focused on something he didn't know or some problem he was trying to solve about the story. And he would lie in bed and he would ask himself that question over and over as he fell asleep. And when he woke up in the morning, he would often have the answer to that question, whether he would dream it or whether it would just come to him after he woke up. And you might not, maybe you don't have the time or the environment to allow you to have the peace and quiet where you're lying there and you're thinking the question over and over. But if you do spend some time brainstorming today and then you sleep on it, chances are tomorrow your subconscious will keep working on those questions, and tomorrow you will have more than you had today. And that's a great way to keep the momentum of your story going, so you never get to the point where, oh no, I don't know what happens next, I'm completely blank. I invite you to come back to more. I don't know if all the videos will be as long as today's. I had actually planned it to be a little shorter, but I guess I have more to say on the topic of day one. I'm going to be doing these videos every day for the next 30 days, walking through the whole process of Nano, talking about the different stages of your story. And I'd love to have you come back, and I hope this is helpful to you. I've got, if you go to writesmarternotharder.com, I've got some resources. If you go to the NaNoWriMo tab, there's like a whole bunch of links to character development exercises, questionnaires, and articles about different aspects of developing your characters. There's a list of links to different plotting methods, plotting by question, explanations of different types of plot structures like 3-act structure, the hero's journey, the 8-point plot, a whole bunch of them. Every plot that I have ever found that was even vaguely helpful to me, I have collected there, and each of those articles explains how to use the plot. There's some other miscellaneous links. I think there's a link on theme. There's a bunch of links on productivity, including a fantastic article by Rachel Aaron on how she went from writing 2,000 words a day to 10,000 words a day. And I'll give you a hint. A lot of it was about planning ahead and figuring out what she was trying to accomplish before she started writing, which is something we're going to be doing in these video series. There'll be brainstorming questions for the rest of the month that will help you figure out what you need to be writing each day. So anyway, I would encourage you to come back, bookmark this site, writesmarternotharder.com. I'll be continuing to put more resources up to help you get through the entire stage of NaNoWriMo every day. And I'm doing NaNoWriMo myself this month. I'm on the forums. Please, I'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to message me or buddy me. My name there is just Lynn Johnston. I wish you the best. NaNoWriMo is such an awesome experience. I've gotten so much from it myself as a writer, and I know that you are going to grow over the next 30 days as you write your novel. Take care, people.